By now, you've undoubtedly heard about some of the sexual misconduct allegation towards people and leadership at eXp Realty, and I want to speak to that today in this video. The reason I want to speak to it is because of the unique position that Melanie and I have as it relates to eXp Realty. Before I get into all of the details that inform this opinion, I think the most important detail that you understand is that between the ages of about 4 and 9, Melanie was the victim of very heinous childhood sexual abuse. And it's created an awareness in me that, quite frankly, I didn't have before I knew her around the difficulties facing women in the workplace and the challenges that women face in being treated fairly in the workplace. And it's been a really, really important journey for me as a man, a guy who grew up in a small town, who played football and did bodybuilding and did all this super masculine stuff. For the longest time, didn't really have any awareness about these things. I think it's also important for me to say that the result of all of that information and discussion and counseling and sharing with Melanie and with others over the years has been, first of all, incredible empathy, and more importantly, what I would consider to be a strong sense of feminism in me. And even 10 years ago, if you had have said to me, "Hey, Court, would you consider yourself to be a feminist?" I would have shunned that description, and I would have in some way felt disempowered or threatened by it. And I really wanted to start this video out by saying that I am a feminist. I'm married to a feminist. Moreover, I've been party to some discussions that are personal, that relate to me and relate to past trauma in Mel's life that have made me a champion of women, not just in this industry, but globally. It's important that I framed that way because I hear and see a lot of agents, particularly at different brokerages, particularly at one brokerage, using this news as a mechanism for vilifying eXp Realty. A term that I coined is humble shitting. I see it a lot these days where other agents, particularly at this other brokerage, are using this news as a way of humble shitting on eXp and creating further divisiveness between what would otherwise be two great companies. I just thought it was important as a leader that I share some thoughts on that and communicate those publicly and globally. Another important backstory that you should hear is that when you look back at Melanie and my journey in real estate and how we built the Atkinson team, how we built and grew Atkinson Realty, and then the vetting process that we put the company through before bringing what would be about 15 agents over in 2020, which at that time was a massive accomplishment for eXp Canada. We were the first mega icon team to join in Canada. And at that time, there were under 20,000 agents. And I can assure you that at that time, with that size of brokerage, we didn't have these issues. They weren't something that was happening. We weren't big enough. We weren't attracting as many people as we have. The truth is, with any large corporation, over time, with success, you're going to attract all kinds of people. And by sheer numbers, you're going to attract predators as well. And I don't think that in any way that has happened disproportionately at eXp Realty. As it turns out, there were 2 men that were accused of sexual misconduct and charged. You can easily find those on Google or ChatGPT. And the allegations are serious, but the fact remains is that both of those cases were dismissed, and there's no proof that any of that stuff actually happened. Now, if you were to ask me, based on these statements, the likelihood of women falsifying their statements. Do you think that those things happened? I do. I don't know, but I think that those things probably happened, and it sickens me and saddens me that they were at my company. But the other side of that is they could have just as easily been at any real estate company. The next question, I think, comes down to how the leadership has responded. The two people named primarily were Glenn Sanford and Brent Gove. So when Melanie and I were going through the vetting process of eXp, I can tell you that I was really proud of Atkinson Realty, and I didn't want to give the appearance of having failed and leapfrogged over to eXp to save our business. That wasn't the case, but I was fearful of that. My ego was, tied up into this brokerage and the name of it, of course. And so I needed to be especially certain that where we were going had the highest likelihood of success possible. Moreover, in order for us to do it as a family, there was an incredible amount of vetting that went on, not just in terms of the financials of the company, not just in terms of meeting literally the entire C-suite of the company at that time, not just flying down to Vegas to meet them all and to put the questions to them and to pull the curtain back and spend time behind the curtain, ensuring that what we thought was true was indeed true. But to recognize that entire process also gave Melanie the opportunity to shake hands, to get to know, and to potentially build friendships with each and every one of these people who would be the leaders, who are, in many cases, still the leaders at eXp Realty. And I name Glenn specifically and Brent specifically. Brent's my two-up sponsor. My direct sponsor is Jeff Wilms. Love you, Jeff. And I wanted to share a little bit about our first impressions of these men. There's no question Glenn's one of the most driven people on the planet. He's as sharp as they come. He's got incredible tenacity. He's a relationship builder. He's a deal maker. But overall, our belief then and our belief now is that Glenn's a community builder, that he truly wanted to do something special for agents, that empowered agents and put them in a position to live transformative lives. And Brent is the kind of person who you attract when you're someone like Glenn Sanford. Of course, I'm going to say this, but if you have the opportunity to meet Brent and to know him and to become friends with him and to meet his wife and his kids and his family, you too would understand that there is absolutely no culture between these two men or in this organization of supporting the kind of behavior that those men had been accused by. But you also have to remember, I have to remember, that in corporate structures like the ones that we belong to here at eXp Realty and some of the others who are humble shitting on our brokerage for this supposed cultural negativity, is that the shareholders in eXp Realty and many other agent-owned brokerages are the people that the leadership has a fiduciary duty to. It's not to the client. It's not to the public. It's to the shareholder. And so then it would extend quite naturally that leadership has a legal obligation to protect, using all legal and ethical means necessary, the reputation of the company and the shareholders of the company. The challenge here being that two of the shareholders in the company were also the accused. Now, I'm proud to say that those two people are no longer at eXp, and neither are the other folks that are closely involved in that situation. But beyond that, my belief is that eXp has done exactly what any company would do, which is respect the fact that this is an important issue, acknowledge any pain that may have occurred, make changes in terms of education and communication that would mitigate this happening in the future as much as possible, but also not making an unnecessarily big deal of it, because press like that is bad for any company, and they have a fiduciary duty to represent stakeholders. And so that is in no way indicative of Glenn Sanford's personal opinion of men that would do such things, any more than it's in some way indicative of Brent Gove's appreciation for men conducting themselves this way. They feel the same way that I do, which is that men that do shit like that should have the shit kicked out of them, okay? That's just the way I grew up. And that's not the way things are done in business. This is the way that things are done in business. But to in some way characterize an entire organization as being supportive of this kind of culture, I just think is ridiculously short-sighted. Some of the brokerages that are slinging shit at us, admittedly, are where eXp was 5 years ago when I joined. And naturally, because their numbers are a third of where ours are or lower, yeah, there's less opportunities. There's less events. There's less people. The odds are just lower of these things showing up. And so I think we've got to be mindful of the fact that this stuff can happen. Sadly, when you combine salespeople with outgoing personalities who are invested in attracting and recruiting other people to their company, and you're putting on events and they're in far-flung locations and there's alcohol involved and partying, then for some people, maybe there's drugs involved, and for some people, maybe there's bad decision-making. And clearly in these cases, based on accusations at very least, it seems like some very poor decisions were made. But it's important to recognize that this could happen anywhere. And I can tell you this, over the last year, so in 2024, Melanie and I traveled to events like the ones where these accusations stemmed from 139 days. So far in 2025, I made this video, I think it's the 25th of May. We've been on the road, I think it's been 67, 68 days, something like that, to events just like the ones that we're talking about all across the world. And I have never, and I mean this, I have never seen behavior representative of this culture that we're being accused of protecting. A culture of secrecy, a culture of privilege, a culture of entitlement, a culture where men are empowered to take advantage of women in any way and be protected. That's just not something that we've seen. And I can tell you, and you should understand, that based on my background and certainly Melanie's background and the belief system that we both share, that if that was the case, we'd be the first people out the door, unceremoniously disconnecting ourselves from this entire brand. We have strong principles, a strong belief system, particularly when it comes to the protection of women and children. And so this idea that we would in some way be associated with a brokerage that condones this type of behavior or protects people who do these types of things outside of their fiduciary duties is absolutely ridiculous to me. And I relate it to this. Every single real estate agent in Canada and the United States understands what fiduciary duty is. We each have a fiduciary duty to represent buyers and sellers in transactions. And sometimes in negotiations, that means holding information back. Sometimes that means positioning information in a certain way. Sometimes it means representing your client's best interests in a way that you don't necessarily love because you've got to follow your client's lawful instructions. And so as fiduciaries, I just find it insulting and disingenuous that these same people who claim to understand the importance of fiduciary representation to their buyers and sellers cannot understand how a corporation also has fiduciary duties to their shareholders, which in this case also happens to be real estate agents. Like, it's just a really important connection that I make because it seems like these people that are flinging these nasty comments haven't considered it at all. They haven't considered what they would do in a situation like this. And in some ways, your hands are tied. You don't get to be everything that you want to be at all times when you're in a fiduciary representative situation. That doesn't mean that you can't fire your client. but it does mean that you're not at liberty to disclose all the details and do everything that you would like. That's just the nature of a fiduciary representation agreement. And so this idea that I see agents, particularly at this one brokerage that I mentioned, talking about this culture at eXp shows me that they really don't understand this concept, and they really haven't considered this connection between their own business and what it means to speak in this sort of inflammatory way about a circumstance that they could very easily find themselves in and have no possibility for a different outcome whatsoever. It just escapes me about why it escapes them, but it clearly has. And I just wanted to shine light on it. For you, someone watching these things happen, or if you have been a contributor to these conversations, just remember that. This is about fiduciary representation. There's separate issues. One, the treatment of women in the workplace, equality, feminism. I'm a believer in all those things, but I also understand the importance of fiduciary representation and the duties that this corporation has to me and to others who are shareholders here. And I think it might behoove some folks at these other brokerages to consider that before they make inflammatory statements that really paint them in a poor light. It illustrates how little they know about fiduciary representation and the crossover impact that it has from business to business, from their business as an independent real estate agent contracted to whatever their brokerage is, and how that relates to eXp Realty's approach to dealing with a similar situation on a much grander scale. And so I wanted to shine light on that today and make a statement about that, because these allegations are horrific. The things that may or may not have happened, if they did, also horrific. I have no respect for a man who conducts himself in this way, or people that conduct themselves in this way, that take advantage of people, that use drugs for gaining leverage. I mean, my blood boils thinking about these things, but objectively, I have to consider the fact that this isn't about a corporation's culture protecting those people. This is about a corporation protecting its shareholders, which it is legally bound to do. So if you want to get on a soapbox and profess your desire to create more equality in the workplace, find ways that you can support women around you in achieving their goals. Ask yourself in what ways you have been a barrier to other women's success. Speak loudly when you see these things happening, but resist the urge to use this circumstance as a way of soapboxing and creating division between two brokerages. It's weak, okay? And I think that our industry deserves better, and I think that those people can do better. I've seen it come from some very respectable names, and it's discouraging. I would have expected more from them, and I hope that we do see more from them. I hope you found this message informative and in some ways insightful, and I hope it's inspired you to do better and to support women in ways that maybe you haven't considered before. And certainly, if you want to talk privately about some ways that I've grown and learned to view the world a little bit differently, and the way that I've shown up and the way that's inadvertently disadvantaged some of the women that I've worked with, including Melanie, my love and my business partner, I would be happy to share that with you. It's been a beautiful journey of growth, and I feel now a duty to share some of that knowledge in whatever ways I can, and that was the intent of this video. So if you found this valuable, of course, you know, I got to tell you, go ahead, subscribe and like, and I'll make some more content like this. And if you want me to shut the fuck up about this stuff, too bad. I won't.